theory in a nutshell. Triads, augmented and diminished triads. This would be more for the intermediate to an advanced level theory. The other videos talked about the major minor triads. That's more for the beginner level, like RCM level 5. And then once we get into RCM level 6 or other intermediate levels, we get into the augmented and diminished triads. So let's look at our triads. I used C as our bottom note because C has no sharps or flats. It's just easiest. Because the way I do it is I still think in that bottom key. I'll explain that in a minute. So our major triad has a major third and a perfect fifth in it. Both top notes are part of C, the bottom note. C, E, G. That's the first, the third, and the fifth note of C major. If you're thinking of it that way, if you're thinking within a key, but if you're just thinking of this, it's a major third, a perfect fifth, but these two notes exist in C major. Here, it's a minor third and a perfect fifth. So the perfect fifth stays the same, and we have a minor third. So this middle one is a half step closer to the C than it would be if it were in the key of C, if that particular note were. So the middle one, if we go back to a major, I like to use major as kind of our starting point. If we go back to what would be in a major triad, it would have been an E natural, but it's one half step closer because it's a minor third. We've done those before. Now a diminished triad has the minor third, but now a diminished fifth on top. So we have a minor third and a diminished fifth. So the top note is now lowered by that half step. Okay? So now you've got a C, an E flat, and a G flat. That's diminished. So the top two notes are closer to the bottom note by half step from what would be in the scale of the bottom note. Like if you were thinking about intervals, for example. That's a minor third, a diminished fifth. Okay, so that top one is now lowered from what a major scale triad would have been. Now we have augmented. Now I put the natural there because there's no bar line. So it's a C, E, but if it had just been this one, you wouldn't have to, of course, if there's no key signature, then you wouldn't have to put the natural in, because people say, why do you put a natural? But that's why, because there's a flat right there. So C, E, G sharp. So same as this, C and E, but that top note is now an augmented fifth. So you have a major third and augmented fifth. So going back, if you use this as kind of our baseline, the top note is raised by a half step. It's a half step farther away than the bottom note. It is an augmented fifth. Okay, so writing a diminished triad, it's built with a minor third and a diminished fifth above the root. So the third and fifth are one half step closer to the root than in a major triad. Right, so the way I like to think about it is do a major triad, write a major triad, and just lower the top two notes. Or, if you prefer, if that confuses you, if you want to figure out your minor third and your diminished fifth, whatever works. You know, there's not necessarily just one right way of doing these things. Writing an augmented triad, it's built with a major third and augmented fifth. Again, you can just do the intervals from the bottom note. Or the way I like to do it is use your major triad as a baseline. And what change would you make? You would make that top note a half step higher, farther away from the bottom. You would raise that top note if you were using a major triad as your kind of base. Okay, so you've got a major third, an augmented fifth. Now to identify them, you can figure out the intervals. Okay, so you can say to yourself, well, a B to a D, well, B major has a D sharp in it, so that's a D natural, so that's a minor third. B to an F, well, B major has an F sharp in it, so that's a diminished fifth, so we know a minor third and a diminished fifth would be a diminished triad, right? Figuring out the intervals. Again, I like to think in going back to use a major triad as a baseline. So think in the key of the bottom note and see how it corresponds to a major triad. I'm in B major. B major would have D sharp, F sharp. These are both lowered by half step. They're both closer. That makes it a diminished triad. Okay. Now, if this were an F sharp, then I would say to myself, the way I do it, I would say, well, B major has a D sharp and an F sharp, but this only has the F sharp. The D has been lowered by half step, so that makes that one a minor. But anyway, right now we're not talking about minors, but just showing you the way I like to do it. Now this one E flat, again, you could figure out the intervals, but let's think about how it would correspond to the major triad. An E flat major triad, E flat has B flat, E flat, and A flat. It should have a B flat in it. But this top note is raised by half step, right? From if it were a major triad, which it is not. So with that top one being a half step higher, that makes it augmented, because this becomes an augmented fifth instead of a perfect fifth. But if we want to look at the intervals, E flat to a G is a major third. E flat has a G natural, and E flat to a B natural is an augmented fifth. So therefore it's an augmented interval. I hope that helped.